Hello, hello? Ooh, we have sound. I love this new audio system. Isn't it great? Yeah. Thank you, Justin, and others on this committee for doing that. I'm Jennifer Dwyer, the president of the Savannah Council on World Affairs, and tonight we have a really great speaker waiting in the wings here. As usual, though, I am going to go through our introductions here because, as you know, we would not have speakers or scholarships for students or our other educational support without our sponsors. So we do want to thank all of our sponsors. Kreitz is one of our platinum sponsors. They sponsor us year-round, have for a very long time, so we hope you try them out if you're in the market for a very nice car. Similarly, Planters Inn has supported us for a very long time. They help us year-round. Most of the time, our speakers stay there. It's a really lovely little hotel. If you haven't had the opportunity to stay there, you should try that out. And this month, every month we have a monthly sponsor, and this month our sponsor happens to be the World Affairs Councils of America, which is the overarching organization of all of the councils on world affairs that are Hilton Head Council, Atlanta Council, Savannah Council, etc. It has over 90 of these organizations in the country, and they sponsor conferences. If you go online, you can find all kinds of webinars and interesting things that you might learn. Our program director, Larry Somerville, is actually at Silverman, sorry. Larry is a different person. Anyway, our program director is actually at that conference right now. These are our upcoming programs. Please look at the dates. Of course, there's always more information about both the speaker and the topic on our website. December 4th is our next one. January 5th is obviously the first one of 2026. Also, I wanted to point out that the 15th will be our annual meeting. So you have an opportunity as members to vote on a new slate of board members. Plus, we have a really interesting speaker for you that day. Also in January is our International Trivia Night, which is our primary fundraiser for our scholarship fund. And Susan Catron, our board member, will be outside selling tickets to Trivia Night should you want to buy tickets tonight. I will remind you at the end as well. It's a very fun event, and all of the proceeds go towards scholarships. Our speaker tonight, this is a very short bio here. I actually have the longer bio here, but I just want to point out Dave Diaz has spent more than 33 years helping us all, keeping us safe, working in the government. He was in the Marine Corps. He worked in the Pentagon, the Department of State, at the White House. He says here he served in Libya and Afghanistan, negotiated agreements, established programs in Central America and Southeast Asia. He concluded his government service in 2025, and at the moment, he's working in his own consulting business. Is that the proper way to describe it? But he has achieved a lot of things, has really interesting background, and he's going to talk with us today, as you can see, about the risk of illicit weapons trafficking in some of the most dangerous places of the world. So please welcome our speaker. Thank you.
Hey, good evening. Thank you very much, Jennifer, board, members of the council. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and it really has been a lot of fun today to get to know so many of you, to go speak at Savannah Country Day School, and just be invigorated and energized by the students there and their questions. It was really a lot of fun. So I'm coming to you on sort of a high. And I hope the energy comes through. As Jennifer said, I wound up somehow, one way or another, in a variety of different roles in the U.S. government, both active duty and as a civil servant, public servant in the Pentagon and the Department of State. And I got to do a bunch of different things. And a lot of it was focused on countering weapons proliferation, mitigating the risk of weapons trafficking. And so what I'd like to talk to you about tonight is how the U.S. government and its allies and partners did that to great effect after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia in February of 2022. So let's go back to that. If you remember, about Christmas of 21, we were already feeling the likelihood of the invasion. And it was very much in the news. It was getting a lot of attention. And is this okay? Too loud still? Okay. And it was invigorating the interagency community, meaning that the different departments and agencies of the U.S. government were working together to identify options and figure out what we might do to help the government of Ukraine. We were also speaking with allies and partners to see what they would do so that we would do this in a coordinated, efficient, and effective manner. We also have to think about the fact that Ukraine had a lot of weapons already. Most of them were Soviet-era weapon systems, but they had a large stockpile. Then you think about the items that the West gave to Ukraine in the years before the invasion, the weapons and training and equipment that were provided to Ukraine, primarily after Russia's seizure of Crimea. And then you think, well, then the war started and Russia comes in and they brought more weapons and ammunition into Ukraine. So there was a concern about the things that were going to be there and the management and security of those things. And this is not in any way a reflection or a statement or a judgment on the ability of the Ukrainian government or the Ukrainian military to do that. It is a historical fact. It is objectively true that for as long as humans have been fighting, there have been things that have been lost on the battlefield. I was a 22-year-old second lieutenant at Quantico and out on an exercise in the woods, and I lost the pintle, which is the piece of the machine gun onto which you mount the bipod so that you can put down the machine gun and fire it. And so I had the pleasure of spending 6 hours on my hands and knees crawling through a very leafy fall autumn area of Quantico, Virginia to find that pintle. And when I couldn't, I wrote a $150 check to the U.S. Treasury. So this is not an unusual thing to be concerned about the security and management of weapons, right? I'm sure there were, Spartans who lost their scabbard to their sword and they're like going to be in trouble. But it was also especially reasonable to be considerate of this because of the rapid influx of support to Ukraine so that it could defend itself. So there were a lot of things that went in, and we all understand what conventional weapons are. Machine guns, bombs, right? Not nuclear, not chemical, conventional. And then we can think about what advanced conventional weapons are, right? So a machine gun is a conventional weapon. A Patriot missile system is an advanced conventional weapon. Lots of technology in that we're concerned about, all right? So what I'm going to talk to you about tonight isn't all conventional weapons or all advanced conventional weapons, but certain advanced conventional weapons. So what am I talking about? Shoulder-fired missiles, man-portable air defense systems, and anti-tank guided missiles. Why would we care so much about those? Because they exist at the intersection of portability, lethality, and advanced technology. So what I mean by that is a machine gun is portable and lethal, but it doesn't have technology that we're concerned could fall to our adversaries. A Patriot missile has tremendous advanced technology and it's very lethal, but it's not really portable. It's not going to sneak away in the middle of the night. But manpads and ATGMs represent all three of those things. And so they can be a very legitimate military weapon in the hands of national forces. But it can also be a very dangerous weapon system in the hands of terrorists, insurgents, transnational organized criminal networks, cartels, etc. So you can understand why there would be a particular focus on managing and securing those systems. And that was our focus. Very early in the process, soon after Russia invaded, the NSC started to hold meetings to figure out what might need to happen to ensure that the weapons that we were going to give Ukraine would be best managed and secured by Ukraine. There happened to be a team hosted at the State Department, but an interagency team called the MANPADS Task Force that existed to coordinate the activities of the US government to mitigate these risks of illicit proliferation and to go after and counter the proliferation of weapon systems by our adversaries. This task force already existed. It was a consequence of an attack by Al-Shabaab, which is a Somalia-based offshoot of Al-Qaeda that tried to shoot down a passenger airliner in Mombasa, Kenya in 2002. And soon after that attempted attack, that attempted shoot down, the U.S. government and our closest allies and many international organizations started to put their heads together and figure out what could be done to reduce the risk that these weapon systems would be used again by terrorists in such a way. And remember, this is December of 2002, right? This is 15 months after 9/11. So the idea that, that the aviation sector would once again be shut down, what the economic costs are, the inconveniences, the effects on business and family life, right? Really significant. And of course, the potential successful attack and the loss of life. So the MANPADS Task Force was stood up in December of 2006 to organize the US government's efforts to counter these threats. And it was led by the State Department, but included DoD, the intelligence community, Homeland Security, a close reporting link to the National Security Council, and several other departments and agencies. So what I'm saying is a ready-made, task-organized team already existed to help organize the efforts of the government against this problem set. And the NSC recognized that. So that was useful, good news. Now, another problem during this time was Russian manipulation of information. Difference between disinformation, propaganda, and misinformation. Disinformation, deliberately not true, and shared to misguide, misinform. Propaganda, state-produced or echoing the state. Misinformation, information that isn't correct but may not have been promulgated through nefarious purposes, for nefarious means. So you've got the Russian state actively producing these kinds of incorrect information, let's say, to undermine political will in the West, to get political leaders to think or believe that bad things were going to happen if these weapon systems were given to Ukraine, so that they would resist giving weapon systems to Ukraine. Obviously, that's in Russia's best interest. And the truth is, none of those things would have happened if Russia hadn't invaded Ukraine. So it's important to understand this space. We have here, for example, the Nigerian president, who in late 2022 was saying that weapons from the Ukraine war were already coming to the Lake Chad Basin to destabilize Nigeria. That was patently false. There was no evidence of it, and actually there was plenty of evidence against it. But I think in that situation, he was listening to Russian disinformation and propaganda, and that got him to say things that were just not true. So these things were important at the time and helped inform our approach. So what happened? What did we do? From May through July, August of 2022, I had just left the National Security Council, in April, May. and had taken a job at the State Department, oddly enough, as the director of the Interagency Man-PATS Task Force. So I came from a place where I understood what the priorities were and what the operational tempo and sense of urgency were regarding the problem. And I stepped into a job where I suddenly was directly involved in helping to plan and organize the US response. So we developed across the interagency, working with all those departments that I mentioned earlier and in close cooperation with the National Security Council staff, the US plan to counter illicit diversion of certain advanced conventional weapons in Eastern Europe. Very easy to remember. So we just called it the plan. But it had 3 lines of effort, and this is really important because the lines of effort reflect the realities of the fog of war and the chaos of the battlefield for thousands of years. And it also reflects the particular abilities and capabilities that the US government and our allies were able to bring to bear in this particular case. So what I mean is that the first line of effort was to work with the Ukrainians to help them better secure and manage the things that they had, to keep the stuff where it was to be used for the purpose we intended it to be used for. The second line of effort assumed that if there was a problem with the first, we would then step back and work at the borders to keep anything that fell out of government control or was lost through the chaos of the battlefield on the territory of Ukraine, so to contain the problem, right? So that was strengthening borders. And then the third one, if the first 2 had a crack, was to further coordinate across the entire region with Ukrainian law enforcement, border guards, customs officials, etc., and their counterparts in all the surrounding countries to, well, I guess not Belarus and Russia, to make sure that the information sharing mechanisms, the cooperation, the personal relationships, the common training were all in place so that they could identify and interdict any weapons trafficking. So it's a defense in depth. And that worked fairly well, as we're going to see, quite well. It's also important to note that the plan directed the US government to work with our allies and partners. It directed the US government to work with the Ukrainians because we could not do this from Washington. We couldn't do this from military bases, in NATO allies. We had to work directly with all these different partners across military, diplomatic, law enforcement, and intelligence regimes. Very important to bring all those capabilities together. Let's talk about the allies. There's a long list of folks there, and it starts with our 3 closest partners on this project, the Brits, the French, and the Germans. We worked together on a weekly basis. We were doing video calls every couple of weeks. We were meeting in person every few months. We were working through their embassies in Washington and our embassies in their capitals. There was a lot of coordination of resources and planning. Well, you guys can bring this and we can bring that. And then talking about all of those things through their embassies in Kyiv and our embassy in Kyiv and back, so that we were trying to line up capabilities and resources and political will and national interests. For instance, we were a little bit more concerned with those certain advanced conventional weapons. Some of our European partners were a little bit more concerned with the large number of assault rifles and military-grade handguns and other things that were also very portable, also very lethal, but in great numbers, and therefore posed a real threat if they were to illicitly be trafficked into Central or Western Europe. So they had an interest there, an emphasis or a priority that was different from ours, but complementary. And that's really important. There wasn't a problem with us not all being about man-pads, right? It actually was a benefit, it was a strength. We also worked closely with the EU. Fantastic folks as part of a large bureaucracy with a lot of different tools. Tools that were, again, different from and complementary to ours. So that was very important. And if you'll notice, Europol and Interpol are both up there because we worked closely with international law enforcement organizations at the regional and sub-regional levels. There was also a concern about end-use monitoring. This is another term of art that basically means if we give you something, if I give you a pencil, I want to make sure you're using it to do math and to write things, right? And if you're suddenly using it to poke somebody in the eye, well, that's not what I gave it to you for, right? So give it back. To make sure that if it's a really high-end pencil, that you're keeping it in a really nice pencil case, right? And so, because we want to keep track of those nice pencils. So in the same way, end-use monitoring and enhanced end-use monitoring are two different forms of making sure that when you sell or transfer a particular technology or weapon system to another government, that they are using it in accordance with the agreement that's been made. Pretty straightforward. We, the US government, have very advanced end-use monitoring agreements and protocols. Other countries have different protocols. So we could either demand that they all suddenly mirror the United States, or we could say, okay, on what items are we going to use your method? On what items are we going to use our method? What is the bandwidth that the Ukrainians have to devote energy and time to this versus that, et cetera. So it was a very cooperative effort that evolved over time. You'll also note Moldova. Small country between Romania and Ukraine, not a NATO ally, not a member of the EU, very susceptible to the next wave of Russian attack. So we were really eager to and concerned about working with the Moldovan government, and they were fantastic partners as well in taking our advice, our counsel, our training, and working with us and the other allies. So across the board, things that might have been constraints were leveraged as opportunities. Things that might have been duplication, well then, okay, we'll sequence it. You go first and we'll go second, right? There are all kinds of ways that if folks are coming to the table with the right mindset, they can solve a problem. And I think that's really what you'll see in this study. Finally, I'll note non-governmental organizations. So these aren't the EU, NATO, the UN, the OSCE. These are small regional or sub-regional organizations, nonprofits in some cases, or organizations that are funded by grants from the EU or the UN or others, including the US government. And they each, I'm not going to go into the explanation, but they each provided expert level information, additional training, resources, engagement at different levels of government to assist in this process. And they are folks who really don't get a lot of attention and who punch above their weight, as it said. So I've talked about everybody but Ukraine almost. The Ukrainians were pivotal. They were incredibly responsible. They were united in ways that I don't think they would have necessarily been united 10, 15 years ago on this issue. They were willing to work with us and the other allies to share information. They understood the gravity of the situation. If the weapons that they were being given wound up falling out of their hands and in the hands of bad guys, that would be bad for them. That would, in fact, make Russia's point. That would, in fact, undermine the parliamentary and congressional support being given to them, the trust being given to them. At no point did I think that they didn't get it. They were on top of that. We met with their parliamentarians. We met with their committee, their parliamentary committee overseeing the process. And their oversight of these programs and issues was impressive and very much gave one confidence that there were checks and balances in the system. You see the long list of things. I've talked to several of them, but I would also note the bottom one, interministerial cooperation. I've just talked for 20 minutes about interagency coordination in the United States and international coordination with our close allies. Right? There wasn't necessarily a history of that in Ukraine. Their system just didn't work that way. Fine. They established a coordination cell, an interministerial coordination cell in Kyiv on this issue so that they could better coordinate with each other and cooperate with us. And they set up regular systems and mechanisms for that kind of coordination so that they would sort of force the issue internally. And that was really important because you would think that with that history of sort of Russian presence and influence, that it would make it tough for them to sort of fight through these habits. But they again were willing and able because they understood the gravity of the situation and what was at risk. And so I'm happy to say that by the time I left government this summer, there was still no confirmed evidence of illicit proliferation by the Ukrainian government of any of these weapon systems. That is a huge statement, and I stand by it. That when you hear stories about it, you should probably, your first response should be that's probably Russian propaganda. And then you should do some research, and you'll find that that photo of that weapon system that is said to have come from Ukraine that is now in Mexico was actually, came from some bunker in Central America someplace 30 years ago and has nothing to do with Ukraine, right? Or that weapon system that was advertised on Reddit or something, for sale someplace, was the same photo of the same weapon that's been floated around over and over again for 15 years. So it's just a matter of being familiar enough with the real material and the facts to understand how that disinformation works. So in the end, we have helped Ukraine. Our allies and partners in Europe and elsewhere have helped Ukraine. We've helped Moldova. We've helped the Eastern flank countries. We've done some good work here. It's not over. The war is not over. And even when the war in Ukraine is over, it's likely that the war that Russia is waging against the West will not be over. So we still have some work to do. I've listed some of the things that I think make sense. These are very practical. These are things that we've been doing since January of 2022, and they've proven effective. So continuing that commitment and that investment in that effort should pay off. But the other side has a vote. So my key questions are questions about Russia's hybrid operations, their sabotage in Western Europe, their continued propaganda and disinformation campaigns, right? And their ability to leverage their partners and their partners' resources and production facilities, and their ability to go around sanctions to get computer chips and other sensitive components to advanced weapons so that they can continue to make weapon systems. And here you have conflict armament research, one of the companies that I consult with, if full disclosure. But they send researchers into conflict zones to do forensic analysis on the components of Russian weapons discovered on battlefields in Ukraine. And they are able to track, just like in reality TV, forensic files or something, they're able to piece together the trafficking records of, or habits or histories of these different producers, these weapons components, and figure out where they're coming from, and then share that information with governments that can then go engage and enforce sanctions and so forth. Really powerful stuff. Oh, sorry, this way. All right. And then I'll leave you with one key issue. Just like every battlefield that humans have fought on, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. And the demand for better tools, better weapons, better tactics, better procedures breeds innovation and an evolution in technology. So if there's any lesson that the world has gotten from the battlefields of Ukraine, it is the rapidly evolving use of drones, UAVs, UASs, whatever term you prefer, to conduct reconnaissance, to find targets, to engage infantry targets, to engage armored vehicles, or to engage bombers hundreds of kilometers behind the border. Both Ukraine and Russia are taking advantage of these lessons and these new technologies. That's normal. Nothing wrong with that. Ukraine, for the most part, however, is doing it by developing from within a new industry in UAV production and developing new technologies on the fly, and then importing some of that technology and assistance from the West. Russia is generally getting drones from DPRK and other countries, skirting sanctions and international law, and using them to horrible effect in places like Kyiv against civilian targets. So I leave you with the fact that just like man-pads and ATGMs are legitimate tools when used by responsible government forces, right? UAVs and drones in their intended usage, right, for military purposes against military targets, that's just weapon systems, that's just defense, security, war. But the use by Russia of drones against hospitals and other civilian targets really is something that should give us pause. And again, it's a reflection of their ongoing aggression to the West and not just Ukraine. I think we really do have to keep that in mind. So thank you very much, Jennifer. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. So I had the pleasure of spending quite a bit of time with this lovely gentleman today, and I would still like to spend another 3 days listening to him answer questions. But unfortunately, we don't have that time, and you know they want us out of this room by 9 o'clock. So yeah, a few things. Once again, Susan will be selling tickets to International Trivia Night outside if you're interested. Also, if you, like me, brought your coffee cup in or any other kind of garbage, please carry it out. And we hope to see you next month, December 4th. And thank you, and another round of applause.
Can I just say, that calendar of upcoming events, like, I want to come to all of those. Like, that,
come on.
Really, you people should be coming to those.
Thank you very much.